Hey everyone, a new patch has landed for Doom on Switch, and developer Panic Button has announced on its Twitter that it does a number of things, from a mention of boosted performance, adding recent players on your friend list, and enabling the video capture option on Switch. You know, there's a few things to pick through here, and to join me to go through what's happened is the man who did the original 2 analyses, John Linneman.
Hey Tom, you ready to play some Doom?
I am, yeah. It's been a interesting experience going to this, because you took on the original looks into these games and we were amazed by what Switch was doing, but at the same time performance wasn't necessarily great. You know, it was kind of 20 to 30 FPS back then.
Yeah, that's the big question here. Since the game launched, they've already introduced some improvements in a patch earlier this year, which sort of raised the average resolution a bit and slightly smoothed out performance, but it didn't solve all of the issues. There's still dips, there's still bad frame pacing issues, and image quality, you know, it is what it is. So I figured we should probably go through a lot of these, because I think you've been testing each element of this in great detail. So I think my first question is, before we even dig into any of the main numbers here, is a lot of people tweeted at me saying, hey, it looks like they added screen space reflections to the Switch version. Is that accurate?
So it doesn't look like anything's really fully SSR, that's for sure. You've got a cube map that's accurate to the scene, you get the lights, but all the geometry like alpha and enemies don't get reflected in there, which is what a screen space reflection solution would do. It would factor in most of those elements, if not all. But what we've got is no reaction whatsoever on like puddles, anything reflective on the ground. So, you know, looking at your Twitter feed, there was a lot of requests to check this out, and it's possible there have been changes, but it's not SSR as we know it. It is a reflection map that sort of renders something that was already pre-rendered, let's say, and then just sort of baked in.
Exactly. Those cube maps, you know, there is some reflectivity on the surfaces, and I suppose somebody loaded it up, saw that, and just mistakenly assumed, hey, there's SSR in the game. But alas, there's not, and it kind of makes sense considering the performance impact that might have. So I guess the other thing then that's kind of important here, resolution. So in the last video I did a lot of testing on that, and we did find that the resolution, the average resolution, did increase by a noticeable amount, and it didn't drop as low as before. So based on what I found in the previous version, is there any noticeable improvement in terms of average resolution?
It's basically a margin of error thing. There's a Foundry stage where you did your tests and it came to about 684p. I redid the tests there and it was like 1080 by 684. That was on patch 1.1.1. So in the new patch 1.2, you've got 1080 by 720. So a slight boost on the vertical, but to be honest, it's very close either way, perceptibly on the screen, especially factoring in that temporal anti-aliasing. It's not a major increase. Now, what's really curious about this, and I'll zoom in now to just show you, there is more pixel breakup on the earlier patch 1.1.1. Now there's kind of like a clean line on the railing there, where before it's like half of it's missing. So clearly there's something altered, but it can't be accounted for fully by the resolution boost, as small as it is. It's very close either way.
Yeah, it seems like they adjusted the temporal AA perhaps, and that combined with the potentially slightly increased resolution, it seems like it has a nice impact on the overall image, which I guess, you know, this is a late patch at this point, so it seems like we shouldn't be expecting massive changes. They've done a lot of work already, but it is nice that it does seem to have been refined somewhat over the earlier releases, so that's great. Are there any other visual changes to talk about before we jump into the performance side of things?
Well, as you can see in that side-by-side, there really isn't much difference. In your analysis of the original Doom as it ran with the patch, lighting draw, the texture quality is still kind of reduced next to, you know, even compared to PC on the low preset. You know, you got that grainy sort of dithered ambient occlusion still in place. That still works on the small screen. But yeah, you know, there's lots of sacrifices. They're still there on 1.2, but it looks great on its own terms.
I guess then the other major question and the point of contention here is the performance, which honestly, it's pretty good overall for the Switch. I mean, obviously it's not the 60 FPS we had on the other consoles. For a little portable device like this, it's pretty impressive, but it certainly was not perfect. And again, moving from the original version, up to the patch released earlier this year, I did notice an increase in the average frame rate in busier scenes. It wasn't monumental by any means, but you definitely did get a slightly smoother overall experience. So I guess the question is, what about this patch?
So I took a look at Docked in particular. In the stage you tested, I went back to the Lazarus Labs. So it was like 25.6 FPS average on the patch 1.1. That got boosted to 27.5 on the kind of incremental patch you tested early in the year. Now this latest patch is just 27.7. So really a 0.2% average gain. You know, again, margin of error stuff. It's a marginal boost either way. Now, obviously, we've not matched the sequence here exactly. There's too much action going on. Doom's a really difficult game to get an exact benchmark test on. But even factoring that in, the average rate of play settles at the same ballpark as the last patch. So really, I'm not seeing a massive increase. And even in the earlier stages, the first mission, you've got like drops to 23 FPS at times. There are points where it can hit that level. So overall, it's possible it may have been increased, but it's not by a tangible amount that you can say, especially according to the stats, that you can say it's been improved.
Again, it's really a difficult thing to test, and I suppose without really knowing where the optimizations occurred, it's difficult to say for sure where or how it's been improved. I mean, they say that the performance is better, and I tend to believe that, but at the same time, if the actual tangible experience that we're seeing isn't markedly improved in the areas where it was weak before, then I guess it's not really a big deal, and it's just, it's still kind of the same. This is one of those games where the average experience is pretty much around 30 FPS, but when you get into those big combat sequences, especially on the harder difficulties, then yeah, the performance dips really start to crop up, and it can be slightly bothersome.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like, 30 FPS seems like generally where it settles, and then you get kind of like a stretch filled with enemies, and it is always the congestion of enemies that causes it. And then once you kill those guys off, it kind of settles back to 30 again. So it's like, as you said in your original analysis, if you play it at a lower difficulty, you're in for a better frame rate. It's not exactly the ideal solution to those drops, but that is how we can kind of determine what's going wrong here. But yeah, generally speaking, really impressive performance on Switch, given what it is and given how taxing the game is.
I guess in general we've been talking mostly about the docked experience, but one of the cool things that we've received since testing Doom the last time, I suppose, is our capture switch. I may have looked at this in the initial video that I did on the capture switch, but by and large I think it'll be interesting to see how it varies. So Tom, what did you find when testing it out in portable mode using this modded switch?
Well, when it comes to portable play, I think it's pretty much the same as it was before, certainly margin of error stuff. Looking at the same levels, we're looking at the 1.1.1 patch here, and then switching over to the 1.2 patch. There's not really much in it. I mean, we're seeing pretty harsh dips on the new patch at the very least. That suggests not really much has changed there. And as an aside, there's also that frame pacing issue as with the last two patches, so expect to see frame time spikes to 16 milliseconds and drops to 50, and that fluctuation isn't really good for the motion even when it's at 30. So yeah, not much change there.
So yeah, this is interesting. With this whole Doom patch thing, it just keeps showing how well supported Panic Buttons games have been. They've continued to update Doom since its release. Obviously, I looked at Warframe recently, and at the end of that, I commented on Wolfenstein 2, which again, just received a patch in the past few months, which further improved the experience again. And if you see my footage here, the average resolution and frame rate is slightly higher in the current version of Wolfenstein 2. And, honestly, based on what we're seeing with Doom here, I wouldn't put it past them to update it again. So beyond the awesome work that they're doing on ports like this, it's fantastic to see that they're continuing to stick with these ports and try to refine and improve them over time. They seem to really care about their work, and I think that's really great to see.
Yeah, full credit to Panic Button that they invest so much time even after a project's wrapped. I get a sense from that studio that they really kind of revel in the challenge of working with Switch and seeing just what they can get away with. I mean, when you first hear, let's bring Doom to Switch or Wolfenstein 2 to Switch, you think, really? Is that possible? And then you see them make all these changes, sure, big cutbacks, but it works. It's properly crafted to suit the hardware, and you've got to admire them for rising to that challenge. So it's always really a pleasure to see them adapt the game, and especially with these patches, they're carrying on that good work, which is great to see.
Exactly, and it's, for me, like what Panic Button does kind of brings me back to the old days, developers trying to port like high-end arcade games to home computers and consoles that were way under spec compared to the original arcade hardware, just finding ways to make it work. I mean, that's the whole reason that I do the DF Retro series, because I find that kind of stuff so fascinating. And these ports are kind of a modern version of that. I mean, I guess there's more commonalities between the Switch and other consoles than there were back then, but still, it's clocked way lower. The hardware is a lot less capable. And obviously, it's designed to be a portable machine. So yeah, just seeing what they come up with each port, really fascinating. And I'm super curious to see what they do next, which, I mean, I suppose it'll be Doom Eternal, but with the Warframe port and everything else that they've been doing, there may be something else as well. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yep, I can't wait. Right, shall we call it there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, if you did enjoy this analysis, please do give us a like or subscribe to support what we do at Digital Foundry. And if you want to get in touch with either myself or John, please feel free to use our Twitter. But until next time, thanks for watching.